hoping to have public input. I think we communicated that we would not be doing that today, so hopefully we covered that. And Madam Superintendent, I mean, there's a possibility, I don't expect this will happen, but there is a possibility, I guess, that somebody from the public might come thinking that they will have an opportunity.
I did not invite anybody, Mr. Wilson.
So you might mention that to the folks out front. Okay, so I'm opening the floor. Anyone have any issues, items, concerns they would like to bring forward?
I'm trying to pull up email. I need 1 second.
Okay,
Someone else, I'm sure, has information.
we can wait a second.
So is this anything at all that you want to talk about?
Absolutely.
I do have something,
Go
back to
ahead.
your
one.
RLE.
Yeah.
RLE. I asked this of Wendy Dodge at my very first training in Tampa at the Florida School Board Association. You know, I know we have to play nice. You know, I get that. But somehow we have got to be more outspoken politically, for lack of a better word, to let the public know what's really going on. Because us just talking in this room and somebody maybe watching the tape on YouTube, that's why I think Sarah Beth's idea of the Citizens Academy is so important, because that's how you really educate the people that what really goes on.
For the record, I did not bring it up this time.
Well, I saw where
I just-
I saw where Brian Haas is doing one for you know, whatever reason, Targa, criminals. But you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, no, I agree. And let me offer this. I think we're all in agreement that we want to do that, right? I think
And
it's a great
I
idea.
think they're working on it. I did have a conversation with Kim Long yesterday, who said just to have them call her, that they're more than welcome to give advice and guide and explain what's worked and what hasn't worked for
Yes.
public leadership. So
I also talked to Kim and asked her if they would have the resources to basically administer it for us, and she said she thought they could. She seemed willing to do that. So I think that's a great first start. I agree completely. I couldn't be more emphatic about the importance of doing that. I think it's important to get the word out, and that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, because you know, I'll just say it. I have eaten, breathed, lived education since I was teaching in my backyard in Melbourne to the clouds. And even when I went to that financial forum, it was amazing to me, first off, how complicated they make things. And second, how the normal person is not, they don't care about that, and they see it as whining. I just had to, you know, say something to somebody on Facebook. I was like, just unfollow me, dude. You know, just, if you don't agree, just unfollow me. Because they just don't get it. They being the folks that vote, and the folks we're trying to convince that we don't have any money. Does that make sense?
Well, it does to me. You've heard me say this before. Ball State University conducted a survey. They determined that 20% of their overhead, their administrative costs, are directly related to unfunded mandates. And I think it's significantly greater here in the state of Florida. So that's why I'm anxious to get the list. And
Matter of fact, she emailed me.
if they attach dollar values to that, even more helpful.
I was along those lines. I know our legislators, specifically Senator Lee, asked if we had a list of what all of our unfunded mandates are and have been over the years. I don't know if that's a document that exists or something that we could create specifically for the district to show how much we're spending in unfunded mandates. And you know, are there any of those, looking at that list, that we feel like are things that aren't necessarily beneficial to students? I think it would be very helpful to be able to show our legislative, this is exactly what you've told us we have to do, this is how it's working in practice, this is where we feel like we could cut back on some of those rules to make it a little bit easier for us to operate and to save us some money that we can redirect to the classrooms.
Well, and again, at the meeting with the legislators, I know you heard me say this, we travel 60,000 miles a day, 21 trips between New York and Los Angeles every day. And, you know, we know our kids are getting ready for school at 4 and 5 in the morning. They're coming home late at night. They're getting to class late. We heard Ms. Warney talk about the Concerned Citizens Group. They're concerned that their kids don't have access to the neighborhood schools, and who isn't? We're taking kids a block from a school that's an excellent school and busing them across the county, and there's something fundamentally wrong about that. And we know we're spending out of pocket $12 million a year. That's $12 million a year that the state isn't funding. That's essentially an unfunded mandate because it directly relates to choice schools. And I don't know how much of that is specific to choice schools, but I imagine quite a bit of it is. So there's some arguments to be made there. And by the way, when I share those arguments with some of the state legislators, it kind of sets them back a little. They're saying, yeah, there's probably not an awful, and I'm not saying that there aren't some kids who don't bring their computers and do homework on a bus. I'm sure there are. But I'm not sure there's an awful lot of learning happening on the bus. I'm sure that most of the learning occurs in the classroom. So, you know, maybe cutting that back would be helpful. Somehow, I have no issue with choice. It just seems like there's got to be a happy compromise in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Kind of on that, what you're saying about, especially Winter Haven. Winter Haven's magnets have done a great job, I think, in trying to include more. But the other side of the coin is the teacher calls that I get, that they are not prepared. The supports needed for ESC and behavior or just support services are an issue. Brigham shares an ESC person with Jewett. They share one person to cover both schools for every elementary. And the behaviors that they haven't seen it before because maybe they said the model wouldn't fit or they were, you know, they've expanded their reach, I think. This is what I can tell from just the calls being more recent than usual. They are trying to add more people from their communities, but sometimes that means a different level of support's needed. We need to make sure those schools have that level of support so we're not turning kids away from the community that might need more supports, learning supports, or whatever the support may be, academic support or behavior support. And you have administrators there, I think, the conversations I've had, in the past, they haven't had to ask for those kinds of supports. It's almost a different, you know, just because you're a magnet or your choice school, I think we need to make sure that our supports are, you know, we don't look at them as different, that they would not need, maybe you would not need behavior supports when they desperately do, because they're in situations. I know right now I have a kindergarten situation at one of those magnets, and the principal is, you know, not used to having to call for extra support. And we need to make sure they're comfortable with doing that, and then we can provide those supports to them so we can, you know, different. I can say Winter Haven's doing a better job. I don't know that all of our magnets are doing that. But the teachers I know that are reaching out from Brigham and from Jewett, you know, that's where I hear support. And I think it's because their model, you know, is such different than what you would find in a typical setting.
A couple of,
Sure.
now that I said it, is Orange County a charter district?
Yes.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? They are a charter district. I've been told the same thing.
Orange County is
But
not.
it's not a charter, it's not as in charter school, there's something,
No, their county probably has a
Charter.
county charter.
county
So-
charter, and that's
so
how,
does Polk
okay.
County. Does not have anything
Okay.
whatsoever to do with charter schools.
I think that gets gray for
Yes,
people.
ma'am. It's a-
Okay.
Okay, we
Yeah.
need to slow down a little bit because we want to make sure they can keep the minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Bridges?
Yeah, the charter counties in Florida can opt to be a charter form of government. It gives them
There's a funding thing.
a structure for greater home rule, but it does not have anything to do with charter schools. It's a completely different concept.
We're charter county here in Palm
Yeah,
Beach.
but there's a funding mechanism to that. This has come up several times. I need to find out, because that you've mentioned that, I've always, there's a
All I
funding
know-
mechanism.
All
to
I know
that.
is that when I went over in that building, I was like,
Have you seen Orange County's facilities, their offices, their,
Oh, the school district
Yeah.
offices?
the
Yeah,
hall.
it's, and you'll find that when you go to Orange County, when you go to Hillsborough County,
yes,
their facilities look much different than the school board, and I can, having been here for a little while, I can tell you anecdotally, there've been conversations about that. You know, the building in which you sit is the old International,
Mining Corporation.
International Mining Corporation headquarters. It was a phosphate office. It was never designed for this. It's been modified through the years, added to and added to and added to. It is not particularly lovely, but it's functional, and there have been conversations about doing something different, and when those conversations have been had, I think it's been determined politically that the need was greater in the schools than it was for updating the administrative facilities.
Well, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
gonna say. I was like, you know, I'm walking and I'm thinking to myself, y'all have a lot more money to burn than I guess we do.
It
You know.
was
very,
it was decisions as to how to spend.
yeah, that's my point.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
But they're so.
but I
that's
was,
why I ask about the
No
charter.
transportation.
Can somebody answer me this too? When, let's say that Denison and Westwood, I'm just putting this out there,
There's like
refuse to
county
enroll a
funding.
child because they are full,
It's not because of charter.
and that child ends up at Stanbaugh being bused. What is that all about? Because Stanbaugh is a school of choice as well, right? That's what everybody's being told, that Denison's got the Cambridge, so they have X number of seats. Westwood's got something else, but they're full, they can't take anybody else, and they end up coming to Stanbaugh. What is that about? Anybody?
You want me to weigh in on
Yeah.
that, Mr. Chair?
Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Would you like me to weigh in on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, Denison, you know, the Cambridge right now is in grade 8 and we're rolling down to 7-6. It's not full 6, 7, 8 yet, but it's rolling, but they're not just excluding kids because they're saying they're full. I don't believe they have hit capacity yet, over there. So if there's a particular student, I would like to know if you have that name,
No.
at all. But I can tell you that Denison is not full. And if we have students rolling over to Stanbaugh, we need to take a look into that and see why that's happening. I know Stanbaugh that's full. That's at capacity right now. We're working with Stanbaugh, looking at what we're gonna do there, and we're trying to devise a plan for the upcoming year for Stanbaugh as well.
I know you are, and I just wanted to, because when I started at Stanbaugh, we had under 800 kids. And then when that all got rezoned for Lake Alfred, where I came from, I spoke at the public portion of that meeting on the agenda item when Mrs. Bridges was telling us the numbers. And I looked at those and I said, it looks like funny math to me because I foresee all those kids ending up at Stanbaugh. Now Stanbaugh has 12.
1104.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well,
But you know what I'm trying to say
yes,
though.
absolutely. Yes,
And
ma'am.
so, you know, and I was just a citizen teacher. And I don't know if y'all remember, y'all sat and stared at me and didn't say anything. So I'm just trying to point that out as a concern. Yes, sir.
And just, and it's obviously, we're very concerned as well. We've been monitoring the numbers for some time now to try to gauge exactly how many are coming and going and where their enrollment. It's pretty much peaked, thankfully, peaked at about that 11, from 1103 to 1106 range. Having said that, though, obviously, and we know, I know the structure of that school, and that's a tight fit. So we're definitely, Ms. Bird and the team is working diligently to find solutions for Stanbaugh.
One other thing, and then I'll shut up. Rumor has it that Lakeland is gonna go charter. Any comment on that?
that's been the rumor for a long time.
Long time.
No,
Yeah.
this one came from a pretty good source.
I said in a meeting, and I'm sure Ms. Reynolds can attest to this, when Winter Haven was talking about it. And they brought in some high-level folks, and they said, you know, the challenge with taking an entire community charter is that each one of those schools has to convert on its own. The parents have to agree to it, the community has to agree to it, teachers have to agree to it, and it is incredibly difficult to do that. It was a huge challenge in Lake Wales.
Yes, it was.
The thought was that Winter Haven was too big, and if they are, then Lake Wales is too big. So they may be discussing that. I suspect that once they actually start talking about the logistics of it, it's going to be incredibly
Heavy lift.
a heavy lift.
I just don't know.
Raise your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think actually, Ms. Miller.
Oh, no, that's been talked around for a long time, but
Yeah.
but I think it's also been talked the reverse of that and what would happen. And if we could convince our Lakeland community to start PEP or something similar, I think we would see a huge increase in supports.
Yeah. Ms. Fields?
My understanding is that there is some conversation, as Ms. Portney just referenced, and that there has been someone from outside of the community that's actually doing some behind-the-scene investigations on whether or not it's doable. And they have also said that if we're having conversation about giving away McLaughlin, then maybe Lakeland needs to pursue charter as well, and that's what I've heard. So, so interesting that she's heard the same thing.
I think we know the same people.
So,
Ms. Cunningham?
I was gonna add the same thing.
Ms.
I
Reynolds?
was just gonna add what you were saying about Winter Haven, that I think they realized not only was it gonna be an incredibly heavy lift, but that working with the district could accomplish so much more. And I know I brag on PEP at every meeting, and Mr. Hill had an opportunity to come and meet with them for after we went to the reception after Leadership Winter Haven, and the focus that they have on making sure that the full child is that they have an athletics committee, they have an arts and culture committee, that they're making sure that our kids are engaged in academics, that they're engaged in extracurriculars, and that they're not just educating one part of the child, but the full child, and that they're producing civically engaged public for the future. It's astounding, and how they have rallied around those schools and that community, and really seeing how they can help. I mean, Doug emailed me last night and said, hey, there's a Winter Haven committee meeting on technology. We want to make sure that there's somebody from the district involved in that, because I don't know enough about technology to find out how this can help our schools, and we just want to make sure that you're in on this conversation. So I would encourage every group, every municipality to have a PEP, because what they're able to do, because they have people that are willing to do it, is just incredible. So I'll get off my PEP soapbox now.
Ms. Fields?
I had a question. So, the Winter Haven Chamber has been very instrumental in that as well. So, are they trying to get other chambers to start thinking along the same lines?
Other than meeting at the chamber, and that Katie is
I know
very
Katie's
involved in it,
right.
the chamber has supported it, but it hasn't been a chamber initiative,
I
if
know,
that makes sense.
But what I'm saying is that because Katie is so closely involved in the line, would it not be a good idea for her to maybe start
To
talking
meet
to
with
other
the other
chambers?
chambers.
To let them know about the goodness of what's happening in Winter Haven, and to see if that might be replicated in Lakeland and other communities, Bartow, all of the local,
Absolutely.
Haines City, all of the chambers.
Absolutely, and I know for example, they have a middle school athletics committee that's trying desperately to get all middle school football, pep bands, all of those things back in, and they are close to finalizing their plan of what that would look like in Winter Haven. And their model is, if we're not just gonna fund one school, we're funding all of the schools in this area. But before they do that, they're going to present it to every other area, saying, this is what we're planning to do. Our goal is to have it in place by this date. We'd love for you to try and do it with us and fundraise with us to make it happen. But we don't want to launch this in 2020 and you be shocked and be 2 or 3 years behind the ball. We want to make sure that you know what we're doing, and we already have a plan for it. Here's what we're doing, and here's our playbook, this is how it can work. So I think those conversations are happening. I know Katie's talked with Corey some about it, at Lakeland Chamber. I don't know as far as Haines City or Bartow. But to my knowledge, those conversations have happened at a pie in the sky level of, this is really great.
Right.
If you want more information, we can help you, but not necessarily trying to force it down people's throats. Yeah.
I think the one thing that I appreciate most about PEP is that they're not only working with us, they're working with Hope Vision. They basically have begun implementing the Align program, which we've struggled for years to try to figure out how to do that, and I think they have identified a mechanism to make that happen, working with the superintendent and our school district and Hope Vision. So that's a good alliance where everybody's working together. I'm not sure how Lakeland feels they might better improve education. Maybe they could share that with us.
They might not really believe as a whole. It's probably just a small group that's thinking that they can make a difference. And I think one of the important pieces is that when PEP was having conversation about going charter, to Miss Jackie's credit, she really started having some behind-the-scenes meetings and conversations with them, and they were able to take their eyes off of that idea and to focus back on their primary goal, which was to provide the support that's needed for our students and for our school district, and that has been a blessing. So I don't know if there are meetings being held in Lakeland, and if they are, she definitely needs to be invited to the table, in my opinion. Probably along with the chair, I would think, would need to be invited if they're having meetings. But that's just my thoughts on it.
And I mean, if they're interested in inviting me, I'm happy to go and talk to them. I've not received any invitations, but I'm happy to do that, and I'm sure the superintendent is as well. We did meet, last year with,
LEDC.
yeah.
I think the group that's doing this is outside of LEDC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just wanted to share that, I think it might have been the middle of January, I had an opportunity to meet with Senator Stargell, because I had talked with her about trying to find ways for us to, as a school district, as a community, to work closer in alignment with the state legislators, and primarily very interested in teacher certification. That's one of our legislative platforms, and I had a group of teachers, and some of them came and spoke to us at one of our board meetings about how difficult the test was and wanting assistance from them. And so some of those teachers came to a meeting, and we sat around the table, and they shared their concerns. They brought some very good suggestions, some very good points, looking at some other tests that other states are utilizing, challenging Senator Stargell to take the test herself. And I think it was a very good meeting. And I know there's been some discussion that's been generating in Tallahassee about the test and about consideration of going away from Pearson and looking at some other options. So I just think that we need to continue to challenge our legislators as it relates to the needs of our teachers and trying to make it more doable for them to be able to pass the test and not having to pay all that money every time they have to retake it. So I just wanted to share that with you all.
Yeah,
so that, you know.
and you know, as I thought about that, in pretty much every major exam process, whether it's for the bar or for the CPA exam, they have programs that prepare you. You can some of them you pay for, some of them you don't, but there are things that kind of get you focused, so you have a sense of what to prepare for and how to study for it. I don't think there is one for this, so I'm certain I couldn't pass it. I mean, especially not without some sort of.
Our adult schools provide it
Oh, do they?
And they
So
can buy materials, but the problem
Okay.
is they buy them and they're useless.
by the time they take the
They
test.
buy them from Pearson.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's just double down on this and make everybody pay for a program to get ready for it. I mean, it would be a lot less expensive than than taking the test over and over again. That's just stunning to me. I don't, and I say that in jest, I don't really mean that, but it's just the whole concept is, it just seems outrageous, frankly, so I'm not, I agree, I'm hoping they get that message and
I
we
just
can.
think that we need to, all of us need to be reminding our legislators of the fact that maybe we need to look at, not maybe, but we need to look at something different other than Pearson. And to find out, as Sarah Beth said at the commissioners' chamber when we were meeting with our legislators, there has to be a problem with the test if so many people are having problems passing it.
So did Kelly Starkville take the test? I'm just dying to know.
I don't know that she's,
Oh,
I know
okay.
she
I'll
said
ask
she
her when I
had
have my
been in
meeting.
contact with Pearson
Write that down.
and that she had been working behind the scene doing some things, so.
Mm.
Well, you just need to just keep it before the forefront of everybody's mind.
Ms. Reynolds?
I was just gonna add, and I think it came in one of our daily news blurbs from Jason, but there was an article recently, and I believe it was North Carolina, that has a very similar test that Pearson also creates. That a study was done in the past year that it is not reliable, and they're I am 99% sure it was North Carolina, but I will find the article and make sure I have Susan send it out. But it basically was as I was reading it, I was like, this has to be about Florida, because it was the exact same, they went from an 85% pass rate to a 56% pass rate overnight when they changed the test, and it was a Pearson test, and now, so the state is looking at, clearly it's the test, how are we changing it? So I think too that there's other states facing the exact same thing, that it may be helpful to look at what they're doing if they're a few steps ahead of us, to see if it's something that works. Why reinvent the wheel if somebody else is already doing it?
I have a question. I don't know if it would be for this, if we could suggest it for this, or if it would be for an actual work session. But because behavior is such a hot topic with our staff, and I get more of those calls from staff and parents, behavior supports. And I know Mr. Hill was working on some kind of committee this month to address some of our more intensive needs in the community. Could we have some kind of presentation on our behavior supports and how they work and really how to, I know everybody can, at the district level, can describe the request process for support, but I can tell you there are teachers in the classroom who need this information. So if we could have some kind of work session or informational session, and it can be filmed or shared, I think that would be a great service. Because when a teacher is calling me and describing a behavior, and my first question is, well, have you talked to your principal or your guidance? Have they done a request for support? That to understand that chain of command and what it's available, the fact that we have intensive behavior units in elementary schools, one that's still empty, I'm assuming, it was empty at the beginning of the year. When we have some severe behavior needs, like if we could talk about what that would look like and how we're going to move those programs forward since they're brand new, I think it would be a service for the community as well as our staff who don't understand kind of the process into those supports, alternative supports or secondary supports.
I'll add for a work session discussion topic, so we have a full discussion on it.
I'm going to kind of go back to the legislators. When I met with Senator Starkville, she was wanting to know a lot of things about our career academies and some other options that we have for our students. And so I know that when Mayor Lutz toured some of our career academies, he wanted to have a frequent update on where we are on different things and sharing the good news and the accomplishments that we have in place. And I know that Ms. Bird has been doing that for him. So I suggested that she start doing that for the legislators as well, so they can have information on what we're doing as a school district. And I believe that you were gonna consider that, Ms. Jackie?
The points,
Yes.
we sent it, we started sending those to
Okay.
them.
Because she had a lot of questions that she really wasn't clear on, so I thought the more information we can provide and the more positive things we can provide, I think the better for our school district.
May I? That goes right back to what I was saying about the list of mandates and the acronyms. earlier. Exactly.
I would love to, and I know they're getting ready to go into session, so getting any of them in the district in the next few months is gonna be tough, but I would love to look at May and early next school year to try and schedule visits for them to go and tour our academies. I know a few of them have done it before, but we also have a few new legislators who haven't done it or have only done the schools that are in their area, where even if they're in their area, a lot of, I mean, you have Harrison and CFAA where there's kids from all over the county that
Right.
probably live in their district, but are traveling to somebody else's district to go to school. So if we could try and get some of them into our academies, because you can explain it all day long, but seeing it in action and hearing, especially the one boy who's been talking about I feel like he's never in school because he's been talking about CFAA to every group for the past 2 months, but he, it's just so incredible to hear them talk.
Yeah.
That,
And I
I think that sells it way more than anything
Yes,
that,
we could say.
that
right?
we can
Yeah,
say
that's
about
good.
it.
And I think we should also encourage, and I've met with Representative Tom Cowan, she's very interested in touring our center schools and our most needed, we need funding for we have the children in our typical schools and we're requesting funding for the highest need, show them that need as well. Because most of them have not seen the inside of a center school or a cluster school that has significant support needs, and we're trying to do it with the budget that we have. I mean, we have, and it's been years, I think, for some of our staff even to, if we could put that out so they can see the full spectrum of what we're providing on the limited funding that we receive.
The spectrum is a good, you're talking about our level 4s and 5 kids.
I'm talking about Doris Sanders,
That's
Karen
what I mean,
Siegel.
level 4 and
Yeah.
5s. Yeah, yes, that's what I'm talking
And, we should be very proud of our workforce development programs here. They truly are incredible. But one of the things that I have concerns about is an individual can graduate from high school and have 2 years of college behind them if they're dual enrolled. But if an individual wants to do something other than go to college and they graduate from high school with a regular diploma, they still have another year or two of training ahead of them. So from that perspective, they're behind the 8 ball. And it's not a product of our school district. I think it's a product of what the state does with the graduation requirements. I mean, quite honestly, I could see a scenario where somebody who's 16 years old would be encouraged to just get a GED and go to vocational school. And that way, by the time they're 18, they're ready to go to work. And they don't have to spend another 2 years getting ready. For many kids, the regular diploma really is not the best option. A GED is probably the best option. I don't think our state has addressed that issue and has a way forward to address that. It seems to me when they graduate from high school at the age of 18, they should be ready for a career if they want to be. I mean, I would hope I think for every kid who wants to go to college, that avenue should be available to them. But if they don't,
That's right.
we really don't have avenues available to those students. And I think that's unfortunate. Our employers, especially our small employers, we have tremendous demand for those skill sets. They're high-paying jobs, and we're just not preparing those kids for those jobs, I think. And that's a frustration for me. I would hope we could communicate with the state to find some path forward for those kids.
Yeah, just to add to what you've just said, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If we had the funding and the means, I would advocate for a technical school, not only in Lakeland and side of Winter Haven, Haines City, but one in Bartow, quite frankly, and one in Lake Wales or Frostproof. I can't tell you the amount of students that I've met through the years that can come out of the auto mechanics program making $80,000 a year starting salary because of the technical knowledge that they've gained. So yes, being able to, give a child the opportunity for a career in technical education is incredible, and it's the model, quite frankly, that Europe has been using for many, many years, and very successfully, because quite frankly, not everybody is geared to go to college. Similarly, on our Roosevelt side, those kids are given opportunities, to go into the workforce and work in various capacities to train them with life skills that once they leave they're employed and, at graduation, which, you've been to, they highlight one of the students that comes back and shares how he has no debt, bought a car, bought a home, got married, whatever. So yes, yeah, I agree with you. And if funding was available, to me, it'd be great to have more technical schools to do that. But right now, we're limited to the two that we do have, and it's just a matter of trying to get the word out. I know through the years, we've done billboards and stuff to try to let students know that there are options, and I know the guidance counselors at the high schools do as well. But for my kid, at the time, it was my area in Frostproof, when they came to me and they wanted to start a, they wanted to be able to manufacture cloth to go into cars and trucks, and they had someone there who was going to be teaching an industrial fabrication, if you will, of cloth for commercial vehicles, and we just didn't have the funds at the time to put that into the school. And I know that would have been, something wonderful, because a kid from Frostproof cannot. Most of them travel even to Ridge Technical, Ridge College Center now, because of the distance. So down the road, that would be a dream for me, to have one in the, southeast and one in the southwest part of our county, to afford the Mulberry Bartow kids that center and afford the Lake Wales, if you will, Frostproof children the same opportunity that Ridge and Travis. So yeah, that's been a dream of mine for years, but till one of us wins the lottery.
Well,
You
or
know?
until we get some help from the state.
Yeah, I know, but, yeah,
Ms. Fortney?
I forget that winning the lottery might come first.
sorry.
Ms. Fields?
Well, I'm sure that we have it, but I would like to see a list of all of the career academies certifications that's available to students, and then how many of our students are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
I know you don't have that right handed, but I think it'd be very valuable for us to have as a school board.
If I'll get that to you. I believe last year we probably awarded over 3,000 industry certifications to our students, but I'll get that to you, as well as, I don't know if you have the updated pamphlet.
Yeah, it's
all
in
of them
that.
in there.
Mm-hmm.
They're in there.
I don't have
And
that, so if
okay,
you can get
I'll
that.
make sure we get those as well.
That number would be
To all of
something
us,
great to
please.
post on
Yeah.
the website and Facebook too, because
Yeah,
that's,
that's a good idea.
Yes.
that's huge.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that,
Okay.
the career academies are actually, yes, we're teaching them these skills, but they actually will have a
Mhm.
certification too. I don't know that the community
Ms.
realizes
Worthington, you
that
could,
piece of it.
you could just put like discussion ensue.
Yeah, poor Miss.
Yeah, y'all don't need to be.
I just
Ms.
want
Miller?
to, from the DOE standpoint, I've heard you talk about that additional diploma, and I'm like, I need to call Ms. Wilson. Nationally, the states have gone away from multiple diplomas, and you saw even with the special diploma that they did away with in Florida, I think the pendulum had swung, because when you offer multiple diplomas, sometimes, and not by intent, kids at 9th grade will start making decisions, or decisions made for them, to push them into an area that they may not end up, to lower expectations is what they're trying to avoid. So they went for everyone. Even if you don't need support services, you might need environmental services or support of some kind. So that one diploma is the lead from the DOE, and has been, and I don't know that we would get them to waiver from that in a very long time. But what they'll say is these support services can be provided in our academies. And I had a long discussion with Mr. Small before he left, and we talked about the students you're trying to reach, they're not in our academies.
No,
Because
that's what I'm saying.
they
exactly.
have to have a certain test score, could take intensive reading. We could supplement and accommodate those kids in those programs, but we would have to start redesigning how we support. You would take that supportive reading might be while you're in this, program. Technical reading, or your math might look like, your intensive math would have to be within your academy of learning. The kids we're losing are the kids who cannot, we provide more academies than most districts. I think we're a leader in that. But the kids that are leaving us, or that we're not meeting their needs, are the ones who aren't, maybe the requirements for the academy, they can't meet for academic reasons, or sometimes even behavioral, if they're low attendance or whatever. Those are the students that are missing out, that in the end, if we could give them some kind of job skill, and I don't know that we need to create a different school to do that. Cost effective, I don't know that would be. but you're not, the DOE has gone so far away from multiple diplomas, and there are very few states that do it. I think the less than 10, maybe 6, at this point, that I think you would get support if we talked about how to serve those kids and get them that accreditation or some kind of skill while they're with us in our system, provide them accommodations to get into those programs. At one time, I mean, if you didn't have a certain score, and I think we'd fixed that on the it was the FCAT at the time, that was an entrance issue. So we need to make them accessible, but be able to have the funding to support those needs within those career academies. And that's where I think we lose the fund. I mean, that's where the funding issue is the problem.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me here and not by calling me. I don't want Mr. Bridges to have to.
That's why I didn't do it. I was like, I have to, because I knew when you were saying it with the delegation, I could just see some of their faces, and I won't name them, but they already, we're not going to lower expectations for students. We're not going to give a less, because for some reason our society considers it a less than diploma, which it really is not. And we know that it's valuable. People are paying student loans the rest of their lives that would have probably been better off with some kind of skill. So we understand that, but I think legislative-wise, it's looked at as you're going to lower expectations if you start talking about multiple diplomas. We have to figure out how to serve them within the system that we have.
But interestingly, a student can get in to a state college with a GED.
Right.
So, were I a student, I would. You mentioned that they may go down the wrong path, but even if they do, if they end up with a GED, they can still go to a state college and get. And by the way, they provide those support services. The
Right.
state colleges do.
Right.
So it's it just seems like something's not aligned correctly. I like your concept. I think that's a great concept as well. But somehow we've got to address that issue, I think, because we have so many kids that are in our zone schools that aren't engaged. They just don't care. They're not excited. They're not interested. They're not engaged. And they
Well,
can
if
be
you're reading
disruptive.
multiple grade levels behind, and now you get another hour and a half of intensive reading, and you struggle, so 3 hours a day, you're struggling to read. We lose them. Because we're not. If we could do it within the concept of something you're interested in, or we could, focus you on, I think that would help.
Mr. Chair, if I could interrupt, ladies and gentlemen, I have a 1 o'clock appointment in North Lakeland that I could not reschedule, but I wanted you to know that I've asked Mr. Murphy to sit in, so you still need to behave yourselves.
We'll try.
Point taken. Thank you. Ms. Fortman?
And one reason that our kids are frustrated, in my humble opinion, is because they're in intensive reading for 90 minutes a day, and they don't even have a real teacher. They have a sub that makes it even more punitive on their behalf. And also, I know a lot of teachers that have a GED. They screwed up in high school and ended up with a GED, and now they're master teachers. So nothing wrong with a GED.
That's right.
But and that's why I think that it's so important that we finish Bartow High School, because they got a fire and medical academy there that's beyond reproach, and and Cozy has spread that all over Polk County. I think there's only 2 schools that don't have that in place: Frostproof and Lakeland. I'm pretty sure. Is that right?
I think that's correct.
Right. They could actually do the CPR training and stuff for our bus drivers, and these are the kind of things that maybe this is worth your hour and a half right here, just to
Right.
share that, and those kind of programs can be modeled so easily. I mean, especially because that started off with Flanagan, HOSA, Health, Occupation, and Safety. I mean, they were taking blood pressure next door. That's how that whole. But if you get a teacher that is invested and involved, and somebody who wants to stay with us and grow their career, and you end up with a Flanagan and a Cozy, who build those programs, instead of ones that last 2-3 years and they'll work at Publix. Just putting that out there.
Oh, it's good news. Good.
And I can tell you that's useful, because I'm working with Senator Stargell's staff on some legislation not having to do with education, but it does, because it's about certified our bus drivers and what we need to mandate for training they would have. And I can tell you whatever that comes up with will probably not be attached with money. And so we're gonna have to look at how we could do that, and if we have an academy, not only is that a great story that we can have our students involved, but we're gonna have to look at other ways to fund anything that comes down the line on training, especially in the medical and the CPR
Yeah, because
side.
look, if you're only missing 2 high schools, then all the bus routes go to a high school, right?
Right.
So they could end up getting their training right where their last pickup is or whatever. I'm sure it could be worked out logistically. We need something else with transportation, I'm sure, to work on.
But speaking of transportation,
Uh-huh.
I just have one thing, and I know we're gonna come back to it, and we've been talking it probably to death, but I met with a Montessori school in Winter Haven, and with the people that met last Thursday. Last Thursday was the meeting, the sit-down meeting with our staff and with the charter schools that are gonna be affected by our decision, and our Citrus Connection people and other people along with them. And I'll let them present on whatever, that came out of that meeting. But when I want to talk about information when it's delivered to us to review, because how that came out, and we didn't have like good data for what it would save us on our transportation routes by changing schools. There was a lot of questions in the community. And when I got information on how much schools are paying us to transport their children, so then we explain, well, it's not a savings, but it's a route savings. But when I sit with a school that talks about their students are on one of our buses to our magnets, who we've offered to expand their route because there's more seats on the bus that are empty. So then that doesn't match that they needed the best seats to get the route to school on time. When we have stuff presented, I think if whatever our case is, because we're going to make the best decision for all students in Polk County, we need good data. If it's going to be about routes, then we need to say if these routes are cut, this is the time that it will save these school, a prediction of what it would look like. So when we visit and we have that information, it's not new to us. I had no idea that all of these students are already on our buses and there's empty seats around them, and they're meeting at one school and making one trip over in Winter Haven. That's just Winter Haven. I don't know all of the situations. And I don't know what came out of that meeting with Citrus Connection. I have spoken to them about the meeting and what went on, what they discussed, and I think we're going to come to a resolution eventually. I feel like they're going to need a lot more time to do this because of who they're affecting and how long it's going to take to plan. And I think as a board, we should consider that, giving them time, because as of last week, this is the first meeting they've had as a group. And the other side of that is one of the charter schools mentioned when they called their liaison to our office in Choice, which I'm assuming is Melissa or that Brady or that crew, they had zero idea of any of this. So I thought, well, they should have been at the table since it's affecting their charter contracts and population. So we need to look at how we're delivering information, whether it's cuts or whatever. We need to make sure everybody's at the table and there's good data transferred. So whatever the decision is, it can be backed up and not 6 months later, we find out something new or we found out everybody wasn't together to try to come to a resolution. So that's been my feedback from the community. It's been a lot of, we need time, we think we can do this, but you can't do this to us this quickly. It will cause a great burden.
Yeah, I too got the same feedback, and that's why I said, I believe the last work session, they asked for a year. The charter schools that I talked to, a year they could at least plan, because they already have their budget for next year, already looked at and et cetera. But, Gretchen from Hillsborough made another interesting note about what you just said, how everything is so interrelated in a budget, and tied to certain money and whatever that you have to be sure, and I don't know how, I'm sure you do your job just fine, but somehow you have to guarantee that, like you just said, that if you make a transportation decision, that the charter portion of your staff needs to be there and they be the ones that have input, because they're the expert on that, along with, how does that affect this and that. And she made a special point in that finance forum to bring that up.
Madam Superintendent, did you?
Members of the board, first let me say that I know you all heard money. When it came, it was never about money. This past summer, the drivers, we had teachers, we had area managers, They came and spoke before you all. Ms. Fortney and Ms. Miller, you both were not here at that time. And they expressed their frustration, greatly about, not only their pay and the discipline on the bus, but their frustration about them having to make routes on time, getting from one place to the other. That was their frustration. The board charged me to go listen, see what they want. We got solutions, and that's what we did. We listened to our employees. We heard what they were saying. We took care of the first two items, which was the pay, and we worked with them with the discipline. And I have heard from the drivers that has made a great deal of, stress reducer for them. But they are also concerned about, are they gonna make routes? I've heard that as well, as even when I was at youth fair, I was talking to drivers. So, they're very appreciative that we're listening to them and we're trying to help reduce their frustration. It was never about money. So if you heard money, I apologize you heard money. But it was about ensuring that we get the students to the classrooms on time, as the teachers are saying. Their whole thing is they're held accountable. I think Mary Ann spoke about it, I know Larry's spoken up about it as well. They're held accountable for that, delivering that instruction. They're very concerned that when students are missing time, and I know Ms. Fortney, you get them coming in, you can't restart lessons every time.
You actually were in my first period one morning,
Yeah, so,
all 39 of them.
so that's their concern. The other part of that is that I know our parents want their children to be educated and receive the full education on time. The whole thing was about how do we ensure we hear our employees and their frustration. Two, on both sides, drivers, area managers, as well as classroom teachers. And two, what do we do about it? So we started looking at this summer. This work started after our meetings this summer with them. And so when we came up and their suggestion was we need to look at the under 2 mile, we need to look at the charter. Because I asked a question, tell me why are we retaining drivers? What's the biggest thing? They laid it out there. And they told us this is what's happening. And so we started looking at that. And that's why we wanted to give the charters, ample amount of notice. Their contract calls for 30 days from us. I said, that's not right. We need to give them ample amount of notice to let them know what's going to be coming up. And that's why we moved out to look at January. You asked us to put on hold under 2 mile. We have done such as that, put that on hold. And we're looking at that. A proposal was sent to us late Friday afternoon from their meeting, which I have not had time to vet. Yesterday on Mondays for us is a full day of meetings. So we have not had time to vet that. That came out of that, of a proposal back to us of what, they would ask me to look at for the upcoming year. So that's how all of this came about. We're hearing our employees, we're trying to be receptive to what they're saying is their frustration on the bus and in the classroom.
I appreciate that, and I think that it would have helped me if I had data that said these buses will now be on time because we'll be able to move these students off. That would help. But when I sit with a school and they say, we get together and we talk to the district and we move our bell times so our schools start later so these kids can transfer. I just need the data to match our message. And maybe if we'd have brought them in last summer, we could have had that conversation. But I appreciate listening to employees. That's the first people we need to go to. When we make these huge decisions, I just think we need to work together. And if they just met Thursday, that would be, I'm glad they got something back in 24 hours or within a couple of days. And I appreciate you looking at that. I think that's where we need to be more cognitive of, who's at the table and how long, that would be.
I think Ms. Reynolds had her hand up.
If Jackie wants to go first, it may
Okay.
cover her.
I just want to say, we don't adjust, our bell times we don't adjust because we are held to so many minutes.
Right, but the
So-
other schools that we're transporting on our
What are you
buses
talking about?
The charters.
would have already adjusted their
Okay.
their bell schedules to come late so those schools could arrive. And then when our district has just offered them, by the way, you're only at a 5 mile radius, there's some seats on the bus, do you want to extend to a 6 mile radius? And then within a few months, now we're taking it all, the messaging was,
So please know that not only are we looking at, and I think I explained this, when Mr. Wilson and I had this conversation, we're looking at not just this year. We're planning out for schools and routes that we're adding. We're planning out for the students because we can't give a hard we know this bus is gonna get here at this time next year, because we haven't even plugged in all the kids that's magnet, that just did applications. All those have to be plugged. If you have any that follow up on the opportunity scholarships, that comes around. Once that happens after the summer, that has to get plugged in. McKinney, Vento, all of those get plugged back into that. So when we do routing, all of those routing pieces go hand in hand. So we couldn't plug and say, yes, we know bus 5678 is going to be at John Stop at this time, and it's going to get over to North Lakeland at this time, until we plug all of those in. But what we heard from the drivers is, what is the frustration when you're on your bus driving and you have your routes? And this came out of them. This is their expertise, as I would call it. They do it day in, day out. Can't do their job. I told them that. Because I might not drive too slow now. But anyway, do not put that in. Do not put that in there.
I like that.
Okay, so good. But listening to them, this is their angst. I would tell you, again, I've heard from them since we started this. I've heard back from some teachers. They think this is the right way to go. That's what they've expressed. They said, this will make our lives easier. You will be able to retain more drivers. Even as we're adding routes, we're adding. We got homes going up everywhere. It scares me sometimes, because we decreased our drivers a year ago, but our routes increased. And we have not caught back up to that.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm disagreeing with what we're planning to do. I just think how we're doing it, and maybe the approach we need to revisit, or talk about how we're going to make the transition over. And I went back and looked at the work session, and Mr. Davis in the work session said the same students aren't late. So I don't know, like, have we collected data on why they're late? Is it always the same bus that's late? Is there a reason they're late? Is it behavior? Because he said it wasn't consistently the same group that was late. So to me, I'm not sure, is it the miles for that one driver that makes them late, or if there's other issues that are causing that late process?
I think, Ms. Cunningham, did you have some comments?
All I was gonna say was, listening to kind of the whole transportation piece, there's a dichotomy in how it's being presented, I think, is what I'm hearing. And the way we've always had it is that staff comes to us kind of with an idea, not with all the data. Just an idea, here's what we're hearing, here's what we're getting, what do you guys as a board think, before we go back and research and do and all of that. So what I'm hearing you say is, to make it easier for you and for others to discuss it in the public, you would have liked that data up front when it was presented, not what do you guys think, and now we're going to go back and try to put the data together.
Well, he asked us to have a consensus to send a letter that day. So it all
Right.
sounded like that's what we should be doing, because in the end, we're going to have to do this, and I agree with them. The path on how we get there, we made a consensus that day to send a letter out without having all of the information, in my opinion, to make that consensus, for the letter to go out that day. And that's me as a board member. I should have asked more questions. I should have said we need a longer time, because when I find out later that all of this other, that we're paid, it's not a money issue, because we obviously are paid for those services by those schools, that these schools have arranged their bell schedules to work on our buses already. Like, if I'd have had all of that knowledge up front, it would
You
help.
might not have, okay.
Right, I might
see.
not have considered
Okay.
that day to do
Okay.
that.
So what,
Ms. Reynolds? I'm
so
sorry.
let me finish.
Sure.
So what we're hearing is, as those things come to us, a little bit more data, right? As to who it will affect,
Right.
more of it, because I heard money too that day. I'll be honest with you, I didn't re-listen to the tape as you did, but I remember him saying this will help us to help with our
130,000.
expenditure. Right, there was a dollar figure I thought thrown out there, I couldn't quote you what it was. So, and I think that's helpful for everybody, and that everybody can have the same message going forward, rather than, we just kind of learning it as we go, and then, so FYI, I think that's where, right, the breakdown?
I think so, yeah.
Would have been real helpful. I see what you're saying. You might not have said that day, yeah, send the letter, because you didn't have enough. I understand.
Ms. Reynolds?
I think part of why there's a dollar amount on that form is because, right at the beginning of when I came on the board, we had asked to see a dollar amount on everything that's brought to us. So I don't know that it was presented to us as this is a cost savings. It was presented to us because that's what the previous board had asked, is if we're doing anything or changing anything, what is this gonna cost? Is it gonna be is it gonna cost us $2 million? Is it gonna save us $2 million? So I think that's why the funding was on there. If that's incorrect, please
There's a
correct me.
financial piece that's on
Budget
that.
impact statement.
But the,
Yes.
yeah, the financial piece is normally included for everything, which I think just the knowledge of that may also help moving forward and guiding our questions about are we doing this because of funding, or are we doing this because it needs to be done and it's helping our students? I think too, as far as the data goes, that's not my understanding, at least from the transportation department, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they spend most of the summer months refurbishing buses and creating the plan for how we're gonna get kids to school during the school year. So to get the specific data as far as it's gonna save us 12 minutes on this route and 18 minutes on this route, would that have even, I mean, if they do it normally over a 3 or 4 month period, is that something that could be done in 4 days? And if so, why aren't we doing it in 4 days?
There had to be something that we looked at and said, wait a minute, if we stop this, it will get us here. Like you're the numbers guy. I'm just thinking there's had to be some reason that we're such that we're gonna do it if it was over the summer, then maybe that's when we should have addressed.
And I want to get back to Superintendent Byrd, but I think Ms. Fortney had some comments she wanted to.
I just wanted to add to that, I just use that as an example of the, pardon me?
Go ahead.
Oh.
Attorneys?
Yeah, but that's like, if this happens, then this happens. But what the training was the example that was given was like, when these things happen, it's sometimes hard to identify because we're also interrelated. Yet again, is the point I was trying to make, so that transportation, like the charter school maybe office should have been involved in that, and that's all I was trying to put out there. Like it takes all the cogs to make that wheel roll, kind of thing. And I talked to a superintendent yesterday that was at that meeting. They do not even bus to their own magnets anymore. I was like, huh? How do you get them there? They find a way.
They find a way?
And I'm like, okay, wow, eye-opening.
You don't have districts busing to charters.
Nope.
We're the
To
only
our own
one.
magnets, so they don't even do it to their own magnet
Because of
schools.
choice.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And then something else that was said yesterday was there was rumor up in Tallahassee that they're going to cut it down to 1.5 miles. That was mentioned as well. Not 2 miles, but 1.5. So I thought I'd throw that out there for the good of the group.
Superintendent Byrd?
Well, it's good we've held that under 2 miles, so now I can see what they do with that part, because we did hold that off. But Ms. Reynolds, to answer your question, it does take them, and I did ask the managers and over there how long it takes them to do routing, and it is anywhere from 1 to 2 months to reroute. So to break down the system today, if we wanted to say, we're gonna pull all the charters out right now and reroute, they have to literally take all the routes out, and they cannot do it in 4 days. To take them all out, back them all
That's what I
out,
thought
back
the
all
answer
charters.
was, but
Right, and put them
I
back in.
figured it was at least worth asking if that.
Right, and that's
if it could
outside
be
of their
one.
workday, or what they're doing each and every day. That's gonna be outside of that, so they can't, just break them down, their routes. Because I believe when I met with them this summer, they were in the midst of routing, because they have to route for ESC, they have to route for McKinney-Vento, they have to route for all the magnets and different things. And that goes into it. So they have to back all of that out right now, and then rewrite it without charters, and then rebuild it again for our routing that we're currently in. So it's months.
Appreciate that. My only other comment was just a thank you to Larry for
Yeah.
the blurb that you
Yeah,
allowed
he
us
did
to
a great
post.
job.
That I think that was critical and
Mhm.
gave a great picture and explanation of this is our bus driver's perspective, this is why, and I think that's kudos to whoever's idea that was from PR, because that was, I think, very beneficial to have that perspective.
Mr. Milhorn, just one moment. I think Ms. Fields had some comments
You
she
can
wanted to
say
make. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that when the question was asked about why the difference in the routes were, each day was not all consistent, most time that's when a driver calls in sick or something, and they have to redo the routes every day. every day they have to do portions of them routes because different drivers call in sick. And the charters really put an extra burden on them because when they redo the routes, sometimes them charters fall into that category where they have to take 2 or 3 drivers to do the same thing one used to do. And that's usually what happens. That's why, and then they get them kids home a lot later at night, so they're getting home at 7 o'clock at night too, so like that.
Yeah, and those were, and I have some comments I'd like maybe, Ms. Fields, you had some
Well,
comments?
one of the things that I was just gonna suggest is that, sometimes it's important to know the historical perspective of things. And when did the drivers come and present to us? I don't remember the day, but when did that occur? What were their concerns? List it out, and then Ms. Bird met with them. What was the, conversation and agreement? And then maybe being able to bring that back to the board when discussion was had about transportation, that would have helped, maybe. I don't know that it would have helped, but it would have, they had had more information on what brought us to this point of the, pulling of the transportation. And then Ms. Fortney saying that she talked to someone from another school district and found out that they're not even doing what we're doing. And then legally, what do we have to do, and what are we doing just out of courtesy and safety for our kids? To me, it's just communicating and making sure that we got the whole piece and not part of the piece, if that makes any sense. I think that would be very helpful, just for future references. Because, I mean, we might remember some things, but Ms. Miller and Ms. Fortner were not at the table
Right.
when the drivers came with their concerns.
And I'd like to make just a few comments. I never wavered on my decision because I probably was a little more involved than some of the other board members. It was something that was a little more personal to me, I guess. But I can remember hearing the stories and listening to stories about from teachers and parents saying my kids are getting up at 4 in the morning. They're getting home, as Mr. Milhorn said, they're getting home at 6 and 7 at night. And the bus drivers were lamenting that. They were concerned about that. Teachers were concerned about it. And that was really, from my perspective, always the core issue. And how do we address that? I mean, obviously, and I think Superintendent Byrd hit on this, if we had plenty of bus drivers, we could add routes and we would be okay, but we don't. And so I think we had to make a very difficult decision. Now, I think having made that decision now, what I'm hearing, and I think we've heard this, is that the charter schools would like a little more time to implement it. They're struggling to get it in place in time, and I'm hoping that Superintendent Byrd, you mentioned that you might have some thoughts on that or a solution to that you might share with us a little bit later. I'm not asking today, but hopefully we can work with them a little bit and you know, help them solve their issues and their concerns. But I think it's just we're just in that place where we just don't have the resources to do it, and that's a difficult part of this job. Sometimes you have to make hard calls. Ms. Fortney?
What you just said about extra time, maybe that could be case by case, like, you know, instead of just a group decision on all of them, maybe a case by case to help out the smaller ones, I think.
Need it.
Charters, and then moving forward, you know, so our charters should have in their applications, transportation plan, we should be looking for
They do.
when we've, okay, what I meant, like,
Going forward.
Independent.
Right,
yeah,
going forward, yeah.
independent,
Yeah.
moving forward, because we are now sending that message.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else I want to add to my, I better look for when I read those applications.
Yeah, and we, in the current application, and you know I'm not anti-charter, but in the current application, it stipulates that we only do that if there's excess capacity. And we don't have that capacity anymore, so that's
Right.
already in the contract.
I-
Madam
sorry.
Superintendent?
I'm sorry. To Ms. Fortney's question, I did, this last round, we just got some binders, and I said to them then, I know there's a template we have, and we need to rebuild it, because I think that's in there. So you're right, you're spot on with that, and make sure we address that now going forward. So I did bring that up to them the other day. Thank you.
I just think there's a consensus that this needs to happen. Just how we get them there is what we need to be cognitive of. Some of them that are, you know, serving kids that we don't serve. I mean, and then move into how do we help them into this? Not that we owe them anything, but it's the right thing to do. to give them that time to make that transition. Nobody's advocating that we keep doing that at a cost of our own children.
Ms. Fields?
Another thing that we need to keep in mind is we are growing and adding new schools. That's bringing more students, and we're gonna have to provide transportation to them as well. I'm sure Ms. Jack is gonna be bringing us information on that in the near future, and that's gonna be very impactful as well.
What do we see as next? Like magnet? Like what if we had to go next? What would be what they're going to look at?
She's typing.
We'll talk about that later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah, we don't want.
Because that would be a whole new, the socioeconomic impact of children making it to magnets, the ones that are getting from outside of their zone. But the argument to that is your neighborhood schools will now be your
There
magnets.
you go,
Yeah.
finally.
May I, in all
Yes.
honesty, Ms. Miller, I think at some point, this board, we're gonna have to talk about the boundaries.
Right.
That conversation has to come up. We have added schools and we're adding schools, so we're gonna look at, redoing boundaries. Now, that is not comfortable for
No.
anyone,
No,
but
never.
that conversation is gonna have to come up real soon with these schools that we're putting online,
We've done it.
so.
And we started in the Northeast, remember when we rezoned, and then we said the phase
Right, do it
two
again now.
with the consultant was gonna be the rest, and we've kinda held off, because lots going on, but I agree with you, that will be coming.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, that was a very productive conversation, I think. I mean that sincerely. Thank you all for those comments.
I had one other thing on what you had mentioned about Orange County looking to, there's other districts too that are very impressive. But what I was going to say about this building working like it does, 12 years ago, and that one outside consultant, one of their recommendations was to move support services in-house. So when we're talking, everyone's in the same room with all these excessive, I think there's no way we're gonna have the conversation about a new facility for this district anytime in the near future, but we have to recognize that we have people all over and in portables and not on this campus when consultants have told us in order for us to work together in these silos that are, I've learned, ironclad, that we need to be under the same roof. So one day, that needs to be the discussion, and as we grow, we're gonna have to have that discussion, because you can't add unless you go up at this building. I don't know how you would add to
Well,
it.
I would say technology.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
would
Can
help
do that,
Yeah,
can do that.
exactly.
Absolutely.
I do have one other thing. I'm gonna ask to use a copy machine. Because I put together some stuff that I gathered while I was in my little trainings and my notes on it and stuff. And I'm gonna just lay it on y'all's workstations and you can use it or recycle it.
Would that be better passed out here?
Probably passed out here,
I
yeah.
don't have the copies yet.
Maybe someone could make
Could the
copies.
You can't just put it in our boxes?
I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
If you want to put it in boxes, that's fine, but if it's something that you want, did you want to talk about it now?
No.
No,
Oh, okay.
she just wanted to disseminate.
All right.
Hi.
You don't have to,
You don't have to do it
Yeah.
now, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
you can do
Put it
it.
in our boxes.
You already
yeah.
did.
Put it in the boxes.
It just explains it, kind of, sort of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Fields?
Mr. Wilson, I'm gonna need to leave in a few minutes,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
before I leave, I wanted to just share a concern that I have, and maybe I'm the only one, on emails from board members. I am very uncomfortable when we get emails from a board member specifically stating their stance on an issue that we might be voting on. I think that is very close to violating sunshine. Someone could easily, without even thinking, respond back. And then we've got a whole can of worms. So I am requesting, and I don't know how it needs to be done, that I not be on that email thread. I don't wanna be on the email thread. If someone wants to give me information like Ms. Courtney just did, I'm okay with that. But I don't want an email from any board member with any thoughts on what their ideas might be on any subject area. I just think it's an unsafe area, and it just gives me heartburn.
And that is a violation
Yeah, I
of
second
sunshine.
that is a violation.
Well-
So, and it's going on.
Number one, I'm not certain exactly what,
Yep.
but I don't think that there's any technical violation of sunshine
Okay?
if a board member posts or expresses a viewpoint and specifically says, please do not respond to this.
But
I
what if
think
they're
that's giving
suggesting,
the
what if they're
view.
suggesting,
Well-
this is how I'm gonna vote on it?
Now, that gets a little closer to the line. I don't think that's a good practice on a board, and I would not
It's
encourage that. Because that potentially then places other board members
Yes.
in a position, but be mindful that in this instance, it is the board member that has generated the email that would have the issue. And I think it's probably not something that I would encourage, but in the, you know, I don't wanna really get more deep into that today. But I think that if a court were to look at that, or the state attorney were to look at that, I don't really wanna speculate on how they might do that, other than to say, you all still have your First Amendment rights of speech, and you are permitted to take certain written communications. My understanding is so long as they are not solicited to you with the intent of having something come back, i.e. create a conversation outside of published meeting, that may pass muster, as strange as that may sound. But I'm not prepared to opine on that today, other than to say that it's probably not a very good practice. Certainly, you all talk at great length about the roundtable, and this is your time to do all this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's great, that you have these roundtable meetings, and you schedule published, noticed meetings, so that the constituents that voted for you and who pay fees and taxes can hear and know what's going on. That's the key, I think, in the intent. Anyway, I don't want to say any more than that.
Okay.
I would agree with
Could you
Kay.
just
I would
In the
pref-
minutes, please, for me, I would appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
And I agree with Kay. I would prefer not to be copied on them. I have talked to Wes and a couple other attorneys
Okay.
who have indicated that it's probably a little bit closer to the line than we would like to
Yeah, and
play.
I would
I don't-
agree with that characterization. And I think that's what you all
If
board
not
members need to
crossing the line.
say, then, if you don't want to get it, you need to say it.
So anything that has your opinion, please don't
Right.
copy me on.
Please excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
There was one other thing about legislation. I don't know if you follow, like, I get the current education law commit, you know, like when they're going into committee for stuff. So all of this is just proposed. But, and I thought of Mr. Wilson, the proposing that if you're over the age of 65 and you've owned a home in Florida for longer than 25 years, you will get another exemption. So maybe we need to make that we need to vocalize that probably isn't a good idea, because if you live in the state and you go to the store and you want people to make correct change and you would like things done correctly, it doesn't matter how long you lived here, you should worry about the education of these people in your state. But that is a proposed bill, that another exemption for people who own their home for 25 years and that are over the age of 65 and older. And that will sell well in a state full of people 65 and older. My concern is it will affect us again greatly.
Do you happen to know if the legislation exempts schools?
No, it is,
Oftentimes it does
yeah, no, it is, it even
Assessment.
mentions school tax. Because they're saying you don't have children here in schools, so you can exempt from paying that tax.
And did you think maybe because it was a financial issue or because it was over 65 issue?
Because you are good at reminding people about our finance obstacles. And I don't know that it'll get movement, if if it's a tax, we are at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So it might not last, but when I saw that, I thought something else to worry about with funding.
I agree.
That's a constant, seems like.
Right,
That's why the key is to be meeting with legislators
right.
and have a dialogue and a communication that is credible, where they view you as credible, and you can view them as credible.
Right.
It's a two-way street, and that's key. I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear that you all are meeting.
Oh, yeah, luckily
With
I've
your
had a good
legislators.
relationship with
that's
our
a very
delegation.
key.
Yeah.
'Cause
It's very
that's-
important, because I want you to hear their side of it, like why this is positive.
One interesting comment that Board Member Fortney made earlier today about it's viewed as whining. The general public, and that's so true. I mean, you know, the way the message is received by the general public, who are also contacting these legislators, I mean, that's a very important aspect of how you, the message.
And I remember being at a leadership Lakeland meeting several years back, and a gentleman came up and started asking about, like, what does it cost to educate a child in Polk County schools? And he happened to be on a board of a private school. And the difference in funding, I don't remember what, I don't know if it was John Small that day that was there. This was prior to Miss Bird. And somebody said, oh, it's X amount of dollars. And he said, well, that's interesting. He said, I'm on the board of one of our private schools in Polk County. And the funding that he quoted was 4 times the amount that the Polk County Public Schools per student. So he actually, when he said that to me, I was like, are you kidding? Because I didn't even, I mean, I don't sit on a board of private school. I don't have any clue. And then I said, is there any way you would be willing to share that? It was like at a break with the group before we, you know, leave today. And he said, sure. And when he did, I mean, you should have just seen the faces in the room, because not everybody understands that difference. Like, you're whining, well, I'm at this school, we're fine, what's your problem, kind of thing. They really don't understand it until, it's been maybe a year or 2 years ago, trying to think of the group, Polk Association of PTOs, SAC committee chair, there's a group that met with Mr. Pitts and Mr. Perone, and they kind of outlined the financial situation of the district and kind of did the PowerPoint similar to one that was done during the half-cent sales tax informational meetings that we had. And people came out of those and went, oh my God, had I not been, I would have never known. So I don't know how you almost take a presentation that they did, which was so meaningful and sum things up so well, and get that out there. I mean, you're talking about town hall meetings, as I'm sitting here thinking, that ought to be at every town hall meeting. If you had a 15-minute pre of that, I think, not all the questions, but 75% of them, people are gonna go, oh my gosh, I really had no idea. I mean, that to me is one of the most impactful things our district has ever done, and I understand it was done in the right light for the sales tax, and prior to that, for the SAC committee people, but
That's one of the handouts.
right, is that on your hand?
That's one of the color one over there.
Okay,
And it shows not just our district,
yes,
but our surrounding.
uh-huh. So if that could be a slide that he would add, I mean, I don't know, I'm just saying, that was the, people were like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry I kept asking, can we do this, can we have that? Because in, you know, in my district, it's like, if you're requesting facilities, if it's not impacting students directly, you know, water in the classroom, you're gonna have to wait. I mean, there's a finite pocket of money, and people are like, really? Come on, I've asked for this for how many years? We don't have it. But that's why, and when you see that, somehow, the way he did it, very simple and organized, you understood why we're in the position that we're in, and that we're not just whining.
That's, you know, Ms. Cunningham, what you just said, that's hard to explain to folks that even with, oh, we're gonna do $9,000 bonuses.
I know.
It, you know, and they're like, oh, there they go again.
There they go.
Right, and I'm like, y'all don't realize it's still this much money. Now 9,000 of it no longer goes to the rest of
They
everything.
can.
They didn't improve it by $9,000 for X number of teachers. That's not how it works.
No.
I think Ms. Capizella would like to. Sure.
It's
So,
not a salary.
just a few things. I couldn't agree more with what you're talking about right now. The fact is that I don't even believe our own employees understand the financial situation we're in terms of just how badly we are being starved to death by the state of Florida. This is not necessarily a slam against any one legislator, but
No.
as a group, they are starving us. The governor's budget put more money in the FEFP the House, Speaker of the House says it's dead on arrival because it's not fiscally conservative enough. Where we'll end up, God only knows. Then they put in more unfunded mandates. Things like the $9,000, when we laud things like that, at the end of the day, over between 102 and 110, and I can get you the exact number, teachers got a bonus last year. Under the governor's new plan for doing 9,000, it's only for 45,000 teachers. And it's only for the highly effective teachers.
Statewide.
Statewide. So do the math.
Right.
1 in 5 teachers may or may not get a bonus. And that money, at a time when we're struggling to have a discussion at the bargaining table about what money we're going to be able to offer for raises and keeping benefits affordable. This is a constant piece. And so I'm going to challenge you all, and I'm doing so really very respectfully, but you are school board members, you are elected officials, by extension, you are politicians. And we need you to use that bully pulpit, because I hear you talking about required local effort, and most of the community has no idea what that is. Not even a little bit. We've got a lot of people that are gonna be happy that their homestead gets rolled back, but they don't understand the services that are gonna be impacted by that very same rollback. You're gonna save 3 cents here and lose $400 of services there. Those are the things that we need, honestly, you guys to step up and start to talk about, whether it's, I love the idea, frankly, of doing it at the meetings. You have a TV station, I don't know what the parameters are of using your TV station, but you could produce something. I believe you could send stuff home to parents to explain what happens, because when we get to the tipping point to get real money, you're not taking away the stuff that people complain about, one position here. Even if we cut all your salaries and the superintendent's salary in half, which is some of what we hear, it's a drop in the bucket to the, what was it, Mr. Wilson, $55 million we're in the hole?
About $55 million a year we're not getting.
That we're not getting.
Yeah.
So people have this skewed view and don't understand what we're talking about. To get that type of money, you're talking about people and programs
Period.
that we either can't offer or would have to roll back. And on top of that, people want to find more money for other things that they would also like to do. All good things, all necessary things, but where's the money coming from? And if we don't start to make the public aware, so that there is public pressure on our state legislature to do the right thing to public schools, I fear we're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you giving me a moment to speak. I know you did not have to, but I am very concerned about our students. I'm very concerned about how we keep teachers in their classroom, and when you talk about some of what Ms. Bowman-Miller was talking about in terms of having ESC supports, discipline supports, Mr. Hill and I, have been talking about some things. It all comes with price tags.
Yes. That's right.
And I hate to say that because they're kids, but it all comes with price tags.
No, we're all on one team, so you're part of that team, so glad you spoke. But you're right, how do we do that? That is probably, and it goes back to what you said earlier, the communication piece. That is what we have always been trying to get better at, I think. Trying to educate, and I don't know what the final answer is, but I think the financial piece is critical. Yes, ma'am.
Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
When I go out and I have a lot of speaking events coming up, one of the things that I am doing now, since the session has begun, is taking Jason kids. And I'm
Are you?
yielding some of my time to Jason as I bring that up to speed.
That's
I'm
awesome.
yielding some
I
of
didn't
that
know
time
that.
in. Because if I spoke to like Leadership Lakeland, Leadership Bartow, and Leadership Pope, those are future business leaders and business leaders that don't understand our budget. They see a pot of money, they don't understand how much goes where the majority of it is in salaries. And so Jason is gonna go and he's gonna break down into categoricals, he's gonna do the funded versus non-funded. He's gonna give them, and hopefully he can get, it's not gonna overwhelm them, which I know it will, but he's gonna give them a snapshot of what it looks like. And so I'm starting to yield, so the board knows, I'm starting to yield some of that time for him to educate the public on budget.
Is that with
And-
the handout? Like
No.
something they can leave with
Yes, we
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
have fact sheets and everything.
and
we do as
share
well.
with their neighbors?
Mhm. We have fact sheets.
Coworkers,
Great
And-
job at Rotary.
Yes.
If
we do.
if I could offer-
We've already done one already.
If I could offer this, Ms. Bird, speaking as a CPA and a CFO, it is incredibly easy to overwhelm people. So you've got to choose just a handful of topics that are most important, and then make sure you're very clear about what those things are, because I see it all the time. You start talking numbers and people's eyes glass over and
I'm
it's
gone.
all done.
Mm-hmm.
First
Lights
thing
out,
is
we're done.
So people don't understand that.
Yeah, so,
That's the key.
But
So
can our
that is
public
a key.
relations department do like some kind
I'll
of
make it.
cartoonish? I mean,
Yeah,
you gotta have something
that's
people
what
are
I
gonna
like.
click on social media and watch, and it needs to be. I used to sell marketing in Polk County. It has to be, it has to be driven to your demographic, where they would understand exactly what is happening in short, kind of concise. Because that would be something easily you could spread around, even to schools. You could show on staff meetings that they could share,
We
but
can
it has to be simple terminology to
Like
understand.
Candyman.
and I think,
Down.
I think
Yeah.
what I'm gonna ask Jason
Maybe
about this, that $55 million a year, what does that cost the typical taxpayer? Because I think, I'm willing to venture a guess that it's less than a couple $100 a year. I could be wrong, but
It's likely less than someone's cell phone bill.
probably.
Ooh, that's a
That would be a
way
good
to-
marketing
that's a
campaign.
But I
Not to
mean,
cut you on that.
you look at it, a 1 mil increase on a city's budget
month.
is,
Right.
$50 a year.
We know.
I mean, your cell bill is probably more than that a month.
Okay.
But it's that kind of
But
stuff. Those
that's
are
how
facts.
people compare,
And
that's how I had to
education.
teach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
You have
We
to
have asked the community to
Yeah.
engage. Part of what we need is we
Brings home
fill
the
them
point.
with knowledge. We
Then they
then
understand.
need to give them the ask of them picking up the phone to a legislator or them writing an email to a legislator. So the legislature hears it from more than just the education community.
But I think one of the things that concerns legislators, and they do listen to the constituents, we all know that, because we all listen to our constituents. It's, when you start getting those emails, it's compelling. So they do too. But I think that something that gets our attention more than that is the fear of word getting out to constituents about something, like saying, you know what, some of our students may be better off with a GED under the current system. They hear those things and they set up. And so maybe we need, a different approach, whatever that is. Maybe you could think about that. Or for the less of the cost of the cell phone, we could fully fund our district, our cell bill a month, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And one cell bill a year.
Right.
One cell bill a
One
year.
cell bill a year.
Those things, if you get those
Huh.
talking points
That's
in front
great.
of.
An ad agency would have
Yeah.
charged you a lot of money for that.
That's
I
right.
know.
And you can do it like a text message.
That was
you know,
Mr.
like-
Murphy.
Well, don't forget, y'all are constituents too.
That's true.
True.
I mean, every
It's
one
true.
of us, hopefully, in this room is.
Yes.
Yeah, that gets people, because they don't want the public hearing about that, because it makes them
Right.
then
Right.
cringe, because they're gonna start getting all of those emails.
The disconnect between sometimes what people know goes on in Tallahassee, it's very easy to go up and be, believe it or not, anonymous up in Tallahassee. You take your votes and the constituents back here maybe don't know till they suddenly want a service that's no longer available. A park that's closed, a school program that's not there anymore, whatever. It's how to make that real so that the constituents home will take action and pay attention to what's going on, because we cannot continue to sustain the financial losses that we are sustaining.
Because basically it comes out of our general fund, right? Everything that we
And all
fought, I mean,
solutions
you know,
to find more money cannot run through your employee's pocketbook.
yeah. Wow.
And,
Go.
Yes, sir.
and the reality is, in schools, we've worked hard for many years to raise a standard and raise expectations and drive our efforts toward that diploma. So to begin saying, because of economics and those pieces, we're facing a need for a GED so that kids can get in the workforce or experience those things, is something they need to understand, because we put a lot of resources and pieces in place to set that target for that diploma. And then we built out those career academies to try to support those kids that don't necessarily want to come right out of high school and into college. And I think the other piece is we tried to articulate very carefully that in the years past, you hear say, well, not all kids are cut out for college or this. We need to be very clear, and that is, we need to prepare kids for careers, the workforce, and college, because the reading level and many of the careers that they will choose to go into, even if they don't go right into college, that reading level is high as you're going to.
Technical, yes.
It's very technical, it's very rigorous, and that reading level is significant. So it's the same as you would face if you went into your first couple of years of college. So I think making sure they understand we need the support, the funding to gear and to provide the resources for our kids to move
They
through the,
say it, but I don't think they really
to be able to have opportunities,
they say
to
it.
move into those opportunities right,
beginning, oh, they should do
out of high
this, this,
school.
and this. They say it, but
right, or during high school.
I think instead we're gonna have water filters on every, that was brought up too, that we're gonna have to buy our own water filters for every,
water fountain.
well, input, yeah. It was brought up yesterday at the Central Florida, that is gonna possibly be part of legislation,
Great.
and how much it would cost Osceola County to do that. Again, out of,
Mr. Wilson, you had mentioned, because when I meet with legislators, one of them has asked, you know, have we gone through almost an audit or an outside source looking at how we spend money? And you had mentioned like a community group or someone you were going to partner with to do that. Is that still a plan? Because I'd love to be able to show that and say, yes.
Huh?
Jim,
Jim who?
what's his name, when he came last year?
Oh, so, well, I think you're talking about two different things. So the question was, there was discussion about a blue ribbon panel
Oh.
that would come into the district and review things. As much as I hate to say this, I can't find anyone who will do it. So what I'm supporting now is Ms. Reynolds' approach of the leadership program, which I think will help us accomplish that same thing. Honestly, for whatever reason, the folks in our community who are the leaders and the movers and shakers just don't want to get between education and legislators. They don't want to come between. It's too, apparently, what I'm hearing is that's a very uncomfortable situation for them, and they're not interested in involving themselves in it.
which is
That's really
exactly why
unfortunate.
folks don't speak at the school board meetings. Just
Well-
saying, you know what I'm saying? It's uncomfortable for them to bring up things and, you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, relationship-wise, I could see that because, you know, especially if you were asking people who are already involved in the community, maybe with the county commission or other sources, to get in the middle of that conversation would be very difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, even those folks who are most influential, who are business people,
Just weren't.
they just don't, they're concerned about taking on that challenge, and it is, from their perspective, a huge challenge. So if you can help with that, and you know some folks who are interested in doing that, and send them my way, we can reconstitute it. But I think at this point in time, I think the effort is to work on what Ms. Reynolds had suggested on the way of a leadership program.
But those people that you're discussing would not be something they would be interested in doing, the leadership program. I thought that was going to be like for, almost like the Leadership Lakeland, kind of their up and coming. I don't know, the people you were talking to would go to our leadership program.
No, I'm
Right.
sure they won't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, they're just not.
So it's a completely different approach, and if we can revisit what you were talking about, okay.
I'm happy to continue working on it, but I haven't had much success.
Okay,
I'm getting a lot of no's.
that's unfortunate. Because the buy-in of public education needs to be a priority.
But let me ask you, what was the name of the group that did it a few years back when we were accredited? Remember that? It's the name of the group that came in and did a, I'm gonna say, a full audit of the district, and then came and presented it and gave us very high marks. Pardon?
No, about the fads.
No, was it FADS? Was a company out of, no,
Are you talking about the accreditation company?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the FAD survey that was done about how we might be able to do it
How
better?
you get better.
yes,
That's fads.
yes, that was
That's
FADS.
fads.
Do we promote those results in the community?
We don't say fads. Some of them, I mean, it talked about different things. It talked about it from a school level, district level, academic level. It kind of incorporated a lot of what they were doing. We don't go back and say, you know, this is one of the things that was addressed through fads. We don't tag it that way.
But do we address things that they might have said, gave recommendations to improve?
Yes, we've
Okay.
improved some of the things that they have. It was done prior to 2013, before that, but I knew some of the accreditation was tied to some of those things
It
being
was.
done anyway.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's why we had to do some of those things for the accreditation.
That's right,
Mhm.
Dr. Vogel, yes, sir, ma'am.
Is that a local person?
No, he's
But we haven't
on
done
the,
that lately.
he's one of the, he was
Some of the
superintendent
What kind
of
of people would you
the Southern District at
interested in
Miami-Dade, and
have
serves
them
on
sit
the
in that?
School Boards Association.
Well, the idea originally was
Very
having folks who
just a
are,
great
who
guy.
are
He actually was her manager.
very influential in the community. I mean,
To try to-
People with money, is that what you're
yeah,
saying? Okay.
high, those folks who were in,
Yeah.
Tag
high
you in,
income
that's kind of what we
positions
did, so.
have access
He
to,
gets really
and who influence, you know, in different ways, influence politics.
You gotta pay.
And there were a
him.
couple of
But our
individuals
legislators
who
don't wanna hear
originally
from
approached me
anybody
about it,
because
but
they
along the
don't.
way, they've rescinded their interest in it.
Almost,
You know that.
almost.
So,
Talking about who would be a candidate using somebody associated with the Florida School Board, or so that wouldn't be someone that that our legislators would want. I mean, I'm assuming if we talk about outside person, it would have to be outside that, because when you talk about the same people saying the same message over and over
How about
again,
like a Gene Paul?
it would be people in the, I think, the business community that would say, this is a positive, thing you're doing, or you could make cuts in these areas. It'd have to be a balance between business and education, though, in my opinion. But the message is, the system is broken, dumping money into your system is not going to fix it. That's why we want choice and voucher and choice.
well, let me, you know,
I mean, that's the message, unfortunately. I'm not any one person, but overall, that is the
And the problem
message.
is the public doesn't understand.
Right.
What is
Right.
That's the
really
message,
occurring
state and national.
in that situation and scenario.
I mean, our system isn't broken. We have, I believe we have a
You're doing
state,
great.
we have state laws and state legislature that is trying to micromanage and creating most of the problems that we
That's right,
face.
exactly.
So it's not that, I think about our magnet schools competing with charter schools and private schools. We do remarkably well.
Absolutely.
So
And our
how can
public
you say the
schools.
system's broken? It's not broken, it's just that there's some micromanaging occurring. And by the way, and I'm gonna say this because it was said openly by a state legislator at our legislative meeting, the goal of the legislature for many years is simply be to break the union. So that, the focus isn't on, this focus isn't on doing the right thing for our kids, it's the you've heard that, correct?
Oh my God, I've taught at have and have not schools. And, I can remember my sister opening Lawton Childs from over across when they were at, there in West Lakeland. And, she'd say, come over and look at our science fair projects. And I'd go over there and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's really nice. I'd go back to my little have-not school and I'd be like, what'd you see, Miss Fortney? I said, we're gonna whip their butts. I didn't see a
So-
cure for cancer. I didn't see anything. I said, I saw a lot of good work and we're gonna do the science. And actually Sarah Beth's little boyfriend, Derek, was one of my state science fair winners with that same attitude. So I agree with you 110%. We're not broken.
Well, whatever the agenda is, whether it's to destroy the unions or whatever it might be, the focus has to be on students first, and we've lost track of that along the way, and it's so very frustrating to me. our legislators have lost track of it. We don't, when we're in those meetings, we're not talking about students. We're not talking about student success. We're talking about agendas, and that's the most frustrating
And money.
part of this. And I don't care what their agenda is, as long as it's focused on doing the right thing for our kids. And obviously, that starts with the professionals in the classroom. But they're not focused in that way, and that's what's creating these challenges we have.
And we challenge them to fund public education.
Public.
And we call out issues where the agenda is not right. And so the best thing from their standpoint is to try to destroy us for speaking truth to power.
Correct.
But we must still speak truth to power.
Now, and I want to be clear, did you hear that also from a state legislator?
He did say it.
He said it, you heard it? Okay.
He said it, and then right behind it,
I was sitting right next to you, I believe, wasn't I?
yes.
Yeah.
So that came from the state, it didn't come from
Well, it came from one senator who has been very
vocal.
vocal about his opinion, but when the votes come down,
Yes,
votes with the agenda.
yes, and that was said by one state, you're correct, one state legislature, later, but I've heard it a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just that, is my point. I've heard a lot of different agendas. None of them are focused on doing the right thing for students, and that's what is most frustrating for me.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been
And the folks
good.
that care about them.
Well, I asked them to think of, when it was being said in my meetings, I said, you not only need to own choice, you have to own your local schools. So if you think we are broken, then you help fix, these are your students too. If that's your perception, you still have ownership. These are public schools. So it's not one or the other. You're not gonna, choice isn't going away. It's not going away. But you're going to have to take care of all students. Right, and that's the angle that, I've always said, it's not one or the other. They're waiting for you to come in with the one or the other, close them all down. It's not one or the other, but you're not going to leave these so you can lift up, some that have parent involvement, that have more support, that have, we're left with the highest fiscal need in the public sector. And when we stop busting the magnet, you're going to see it. And so, even greater. Not that we're going to do that anytime soon. No one, that's not what I'm suggesting. But if we have to start making those kinds of cuts, you will see that even greater. And so for everyone to take ownership of all students will be, and Winter Haven is showing us that the business community will step in and take ownership of all of their students.
Yeah, and I think that's why
Way to go.
what PEP is doing is so important, and if we could replicate that throughout the county, I think that would be incredibly helpful.
But I think something else, Mr. Wilson, that you touched on was going back to the have versus have not type schools. When I spent my year at Lake Alfred Adair with Linda Ray, I had all the level 1 kids, and they all got a 2 on science, which for some people is like, they're still level 2. To me, it was like huge, because they had never had a real science teacher. So, but my kids get at Lake Alfred, who are now seniors this year, when they get compared to a Lawton Childs, that's where we're talking apples to oranges. And I'm all for our magnet schools. I taught at one for 5 years. But when we have the perception that those kids at Lake Alfred Adair that showed up have the same, are graded the same exact way as the magnet schools are, that just sends a message to the kids that we're not putting them first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. I understand it.
Mm.
And it's
That came out
frustrating to me that teachers who want to work with those children have no
Yes.
hope of getting the bonuses. That's.
Or that, you're right, because they'll never have you can still be highly effective and have a BAM used to, because I had one, but not all of them. Yes, it's just very frustrating.
Additional comments? Okay.
We've lost numbers. I think it's time.
Good.
to go.
Good meeting, good conversation. Thank you all for
Yes.
joining
I had
us.
fun yesterday. Sorry, I
Meeting is adjourned.
impeded into your space.